We are not safe in orbit. Those were the rumours that had spread from the forward Admiralty, embedded deep into an asteroid in geosynchronous orbit above Lincoln. Whispered in mess halls and in command tents on the surface, the rumours moved like ripples through a pond on the receiving end of a truckload of gravel. The campaign to conquer Lincoln from American and Synardi forces had stalled after the first few months of ground warfare had shown that these men from the so-called core worlds were well trained and equipped to deal with unwelcome guests, even when their navy had been routed and orbital strikes had been cleared for more extensive use. Nevertheless, their guided missiles and their fondness of ambush tactics had made steady resupply of armoured vehicles from Barai and Quantais, as well as hiring an expensive PMC located on Mekhotu, part of the distasteful cost of war. I was part of an intelligence task force designed to assess their options and extrapolate from those where they would strike next. Until today, my tasks were limited to analysing jump points, supply runs and threat potential of different divisions and their movements. My commander, Ranio Soiran, and one of her aides came into my office on the destroyer FDN Ominous Silence, carrying a box of data cards and viewing crystals. "At ease," she calmly said, as I snapped to attention. I noticed her hairdo was slightly dishevelled and some of the seals in her vacuum suit weren't fastened according to regulation. Her eyes radiated discomfort and fatigue. "We raided a hidden asteroid facility yesterday and found footage the enemy recorded, holographic only. Take a look and give me your recommendations for countermeasures." The A seemed very uncomfortable with her orders and tried to speak up before being cut short by the commander. "But ma'am, silence, ensign. I need his opinion on this, so he is clear to view." She paused. "Contrary to you, who will stand a guard in front of the lieutenant's office." The ensign looked shaken and squeaked out a measly, "Yes, ma'am," before he obeyed his orders. I changed my opticals to holoviewing mode and slotted the holodisc into the player. Around me, the office turned black with stars speckled across and Lincoln's serene clouds floating below my feet. Ahead of the sparse asteroids, I saw a speck of light that I could distinguish as a starship. The recording, taken from the perspective of a spacesuit, also included sensor data the suit had taken and received from the packages these insurgents must have had installed across the belt. One such sensor ping identified the irregular light movement ahead of me as the FDNC Bountiful Cart. Before I could recall all I knew about that vessel, I was launched. Yes, the suit recording. It is sometimes difficult to tell the difference between holo and reality towards the sensor ping. The pilot looked about, graciously showing me that his suit didn't have thrusters allowing for such rapid acceleration, suggesting some gas-launching system had provided his vector and velocity. The Bountiful Cart grew ever larger in the sky, and my bare eyes, and the sensor data show that she was in the process of refueling and loading cargo for transport to the surface. As I mean the pilot, flew closer, he raised his arms and shot jets of pressurized gas to slow his approach. As he did so, I noticed the suit seemed to be made of some kind of mirroring material that hid the suit from the starfield around him. He came to a halt and magnetically attached to a cargo crate, 2 droids were maneuvering, to a cargo rack mounted on the hull, slightly front of the engine section of the Bountiful Cart. I noticed the operative kept out of the peripheral sight of the droids, correctly assessing their secondary purpose as sentries, as he began planting detonite charges on the crate. He seemed familiar with our design philosophy, and adeptly placed the explosives where they would also cripple the ship effectively. When he was done, he drew his assault rifle and a large cylinder with 2 slits at each side he had attached to his leg, as the droids dutifully carried the cargo-turned bomb to its destination. He attached the cylinder to the muzzle of his rifle, and moved to aim his weapon at the ship he was approaching. The sensors he was pulling data from tagged 2 crew members of the cart chatting at an airlock, 2 anti-missile interception drones patrolling on the other side of the vessel, and 3 other cargo drones maneuvering the final batch of munitions planet-bound. He aimed carefully and fired 2 blasts in quick succession, so quickly that both men of the airlock immediately succumbed to his salvo before being remotely capable of reacting. "Without recoiling 0G? But how?" was the only thing I could mutter. Such was I captivated by the way this person fought. Was it even a person? Could it be a highly advanced warform doing this? I pushed these questions aside for later. Before the droids locked the cargo pod to its designated slot on the rack, the pilot jumped towards the airlock, aided by his gas thrusters. The men on duty were still floating there, with bizarre sculptures of flash-frozen blood emerging from their helmets as the only testimony to their violent end. Despite myself, I marveled at the precision and speed they displayed in their marksmanship, and wondered what technological assistance they had used. The alarm had to be raised to code orange once the vitals of more than 2 crew members plummeted, and the intruder seemed to be less concerned with stealth by this point, placing thermite breaching charges on the airlock. The operator activated the timer on the breaching device and magnetically attached to the hull in order to avoid getting thrown off the ship. The thermite easily chewed through the airlock, and the vacuum of space immediately devoured the hot metal, alongside the unfortunate crewmen who had come to investigate 2 lost vital signals, or whatever else didn't have the luxury of pressure-shielded steel between it and the hungry maelstrom. The operative stepped into the ship and quickly moved to a data port. There he slotted a data shard and began disabling security measures and acquiring as much data as was allowed from this terminal. From the hole in the airlock, I could see the stars moving, and the interceptor drones assessed the damage to the hull. Seemingly unbothered by them, the person in the suit recovered his shards, pulled what looked like a laser guiding system from his breast pocket, and leaped out of the hole he had torn into the hull of the bountiful cart. I struggled to keep my lunch in my stomach as the bright dots turned around me, yet somehow this being pointed the laser at the interceptors as he spun away. "What is he doing?" I couldn't help myself from exclaiming. It just seemed so foolish. And yet here this soldier had kept one of the interceptors painted under his laser, long enough to allow a tungsten slug fired from a railgun, void knew where, to turn it into a cloud of shrapnel and incandescent gas. As the picture stabilized and I began moving further and further away from the ship, I began to realize something. The image faded and the recording ended. Commander Rani O'Suryan broke the silence in the wake of the hologram fading and asked, "Will you guess as to what happened to the bountiful cart?" My answer came quickly to me. It would seem she followed the doctrine designed to keep supply ships safe from pirates and enter the atmosphere, alerted the Navy to the possibility of hostiles at her current position, and ignored losses as ordered to in such instances. I swallowed. But the captain didn't know of the detonite placed on the cargo slot beneath his port engines, so, judging by your question, I take it the explosives were triggered in the atmosphere, when they couldn't escape from the gravity of the surface. Exactly. Not only that, but they had calculated the point where triggering the explosives would allow for them to prepare looting parties that looted weapons, munitions, and medicine, before we were forced to deploy an orbital strike on that location. This requires central leadership that is capable of communicating between armed forces in space and dirtside. One of the interceptors was destroyed by a laser-guided railgun. My voice trailed off as I realized another thing. The pieces fit together. Certainly a lost supply ship caused headaches and frowns in the Admiralty, but Commander O'Suryan was way too disquieted for a retrofitted ore-hauler to be the only losses sustained yesterday. We also lost the relief force, didn't we? The railguns were also pointed there. Someone had sensors and a spotter aiming the cannon, so why not also shred them? I was staring at my boots as the consequences of my analysis kept hitting my chest in waves. Then I heard the commander sob next to me. "Jesho was on one of the ships sent there. The Admiral said they found no survivors, that the shrapnel made scans worthless, that... Her words broke off in her sobs. "They will have to sue for peace. There were no options left to us. Not that they have sent 2 of their carriers with an escort fleet." Her words passed by me as I revisited the attack in my mind, and I wondered if the soldiers dirtside had faced similar warriors. If we had been blind to the true ferocity the core rats could show from our polished decks and star charts, and what strategies might save us now, my mind came up blank.